Yeah, so part of it is on the older adults, right? You have to reach out and want that, and it's hard to look at. But I think part of the responsibility is for family members and society or groups that endeavor to do this. Then you have to reach out. You have to say, the John Prine song, "Hello in There." You have to say hello in there and keep doing it. I think sometimes in our world of help is like, well, I offered my help and they didn't want it. No, you're like a beacon. You're like a lighthouse. That message has to keep going out periodically when the light comes around and it beams. And that's what was the recovery process for me. It wasn't that there was finally, I don't know, somebody must have said something. I know what it was that got to me.
I'm Dr. Regina Koepp. I'm a clinical geropsychologist, which means that I'm a psychologist who specializes with older adults and families. And this is the Psychology of Aging podcast, your go-to resource for mental health and aging. Each week, I have the incredible honor of interviewing experts in the field of mental health and aging, neurology, neuropsychology, and then also people with lived experience. Lived experience is an interesting term because we all have lived experience. Today, I'm interviewing Jim Klasen. Jim is an advanced level wellness recovery action plan facilitator and certified older adult peer specialist trainer. He brings over 40 years of experience from the workforce development field and has worked with youth, welfare recipients, people returning home from prison, and persons impacted by trauma, mental health, and substance-related challenges. As a certified peer specialist, Jim brings his own lived experience, sharing his recovery journey openly as evidence that recovery and wellness are both possible and achievable. His journey has led to his encore career, he calls it, as a facilitator of peer support for other older adults who are experiencing mental health and substance use conditions. This is a really tender episode. In our conversation, Jim and I talk about our experiences with mental health. And Jim also talks about the importance of music in his own recovery. And at the very end, sings a beautiful song. And I have to tell you, this song is so sweet. It's so warm and loving. Yesterday or this week, my 6-year-old, she has a severe dairy allergy and accidentally drank some of her little brother's cow milk. And we had to be in the hospital for a day. It was pretty intense. I had to give her an EpiPen and then take her to urgent care. At urgent care, we had to give another EpiPen because she was having trouble breathing and had a lot of GI issues. And then we had to take an ambulance to the children's hospital and be monitored for 24 hours. She's home and fine. She returned to school. Dairy allergies and other food allergies are no joke. But as we were resting in the hospital room, I was editing this podcast and I played Jim's song out loud for Lena, and that's my 6-year-old's name, and my husband. And Lena asked to play the song again because she thought it was so soothing and comforting. And so thanks, Jim, for soothing and comforting my little one with your beautiful music. Jim shares at the end of this episode a beautiful song. And so I hope you listen all the way through to get to that glory, that masterpiece. All right, let's jump into the interview with Jim Klasen. I first learned about you at the National Council on Aging at their 4th annual Older Adults Mental Health Awareness Symposium. And you had a brief segment there, and your warmth and honesty and your focus on wellness was so delightful. I thought, well,
Thank
I need
you.
to interview you. I need to hear more about your story. So thanks so much for being
Oh,
here.
sure. Thanks.
Will you tell us a little bit about you, like where you grew up and where you live now? Who's in your family?
Sure. Yes. So I grew up north of Syracuse, actually, sort of semi-rural. It was still would have been then, post World War II, born in 1949, and yeah, I grew up in North Syracuse, or Picture Hill, actually, is what it's called. Spent a lot of time on Oneida Lake, so kind of a rural upbringing. I had a mother and a father. My father was much older than my mother and kind of focused around business things. So, those little father issues probably, persist. It, in 1955, he converted our house into a motel. If you remember those like flat top motels that you saw in the 50s, or maybe you still see them in the countryside. So we kind of grew up in this family business. So to escape the rigors of cleaning motel rooms and mowing the lawn and all of that, and probably other things, I spent as many weekends as I could with my grandparents, and Regina, we talked about this a little bit earlier, right? Just this affinity, closeness with older adults, and their unconditional love for me, and we were certainly, they were factory workers. We're not talking about coming from money or anything like that, but just the love, the humor, the acceptance, and as I look back on it, the blessings of growing up as a kid in the 50s, in not the country, but just a lot more freedom than I think kids maybe experience today. Started to struggle some around those middle school years, socially and academically, and then very fortunately was able to go to a high school that was really very supportive and instrumental. One of the sort of benchmarks or stakes in the ground that I would say, helped me. Went to college, went to Lemoyne College in Syracuse. Did okay. I actually, if looking back now, I was depressed, but I didn't know that I was, experiencing a depression. My sister knew she was, and my sister, who's a year and a half younger than me, was actually in the hospital back then, electroshock therapy, and so trying to support her and all of that. So increasingly, like in the 20s, graduated from college, got married, and then sort of my stuff started coming out. Or mental health and behavioral health kinds of things, which includes the depression, which may be a family trait, but perhaps not sure exactly how that works, and self-medicating, and that aspect of my story only got worse, I have to confess. I will say, though, early on, I knew something was up, something was wrong, and did seek help. But I'm not sure back then or where I lived that folks knew what help looked like, or professional help. And certainly we know, and I know you've dealt with this too, it's a stigma and prejudice, not just with older adults, but just around, just saying mental health is an issue, right? Rather than just health. And health includes all of these aspects, and even these aspects that interact with one another. But it's this dualistic world that we still live in, I guess, is like, so if you say mental health, that's a problem, and it brings up all kinds of things. So it's not something I discussed with friends or family, but I did know that something was up. Had a successful career, in human services, always work, probably, oh my goodness, now you're reminding me of all kinds of threads or themes that I don't think about on a day-to-day basis. Most of my work was with young people, quote unquote. And again, we get into the jargon, the labels that we use, and labels are for jars, right? It's one of the slogans we say around here, but quote unquote, disadvantaged youth, whatever that means, economically, not doing well academically, maybe high school dropouts or kids at risk of that. So after school jobs, mentoring, GED programs, conservation corps, urban corps, work in teams, that was my career, and just so much, really a terrific career. But my secret lives, plural, did certainly manage to follow me and create all manner of difficulties. Interestingly, not so much, a little bit with work, but not so much. I was fortunate there. I mean, a lot of my friends who maybe had drug issues or whatever, certainly affected their employability. For me, it certainly affected family life, because it's very difficult for families to understand some of the things that we go through emotionally, understanding those things as a health concern, and not betrayal or why are you doing this to us, or that kind of thing. So yeah.
Will you say more about the secret lives that you mentioned?
Well, I think that the depression itself was a secret life, and you can probably tell from my affect. This is an easygoing, cheerful guy. Everything, it's all good in the neighborhood. Well, what's the problem? And I was pretty good at doing that, right? And I call that, with some kind of cynicism or sarcasm now, is playing make believe. And I really got tired of playing make believe. But the make believe was that everything's okay, and I'm a hard worker, and I'm doing this great work, and I was, and I was treating myself with various substances that I thought made me feel better. And maybe they did. I'm not saying that those things don't work. They actually do, sometimes for 15 minutes. And then the consequences are worse than the problem that you're trying to solve. So some of those early, behaviors of probably trying to cope with the depression is what it was, right? Get high and all of that. I'm not a professional musician, but I've played guitar and sang since I was 13, and it's really one of the things that's another one of those kind of stakes in the ground that's really stuck with me very, very well. But along with that can be kind of some hanging out that may not have been all that healthy. So that's what I mean by secret lives, is using drugs and the machinations of doing that, of having to sneak off, of disappearing for maybe several days, being on a real roll or whatever. And I say that the drug use got worse over time with more serious drugs, and not just talking about smoking some weed and then playing the guitar with friends, talking about drug use that over time really becomes very isolated. It's not a social thing, and that's why I was almost kind of laugh, like people say, "Well, you want a party?" I said, it may have been a party for 3 months or 6 months. After that, it was work. And took me years to then. That's why I say it took me 6 months to get. Was probably the worst of my great urban adventure here in Philadelphia. I guess I missed that part in the story. Moved to Philadelphia in '86, just in time to get into some real trouble for a country kid. And even folks on the street that would say, dude, you ain't built for this. You're going to last about 6 months. And, they were about right. It was about 6 months of heavy usage and then 13 years to get myself unscrewed from that. And the unscrewing is interesting because still then we talked about recovery as meaning like drugs and alcohol, right? Back in the day, that's all that it meant. The meaning is now recovery is kind of expanded out to pandemic proportions even. But back then it kind of meant that. And that's really what was presenting. People wanted me to stop using. They wanted me to be good. And it was in those 13 years, what was required is to figure out that this is more than just that. Because I could quit.
More than substance use. There was something.
Stop. Sure. Let's stop. Stop for a couple of months, stop for 2 years, stop for 5 years, because not getting at what is going on underneath. And it's not until some very good people, and I'm talking about professional people, understood that this isn't one thing. You're not just a quote unquote, you're not just a drug addict. And we try to, in our person first language and recovery oriented language, we try to avoid that kind of things. But, hi, I'm Jim, I'm a drug addict, right? Kind of thing. That was certainly the presenting issue. But there was all kinds of emotional family stuff and history that went underneath that I'm still unpacking. I'm not saying that I've unpacked all of that, but that needed to have anything that looked like wellness and recovery over a more substantial period of time.
There's so much I want to follow up with you on. Can you say more about what your red flags of depression were? What were your own symptoms of depression? I kind of like to think of, we have this criteria for depression, and then I think we all carry, those of us who experience depression or another mental health condition, it's like we have our own fingerprint of our mental health concerns. I've had my own history of depression. It hasn't looked like I thought, even as a mental health provider, like I thought it should look. And I think it's my own fingerprint.
True.
So what is your fingerprint of depression?
But I think it's so true what you're saying of just thinking of these sort of diagnostic or clinical words that we use. And I mean, what you're bringing up for me is just how lacking, how they're not terribly descriptive, right? Probably because it's trying to describe a range of ways that it might manifest itself in people. I guess, saying depressed was like absolutely fatigued, so exhausted, just eviscerated, even just to the extent of like just feeling like gone. So not being able to get out of bed, not being able to eat, not being able to, to wash. So that kind of physical and emotional, just spent, done. I gave at the office, but, kind of exhaustion. But the other part of it for me had to do with relationships, had to do with isolation, not wanting to connect with people, so that's a horrible conundrum there, right? Because it's absolutely what you need is human connection and comfort, nurturing, understanding, and it just feels like every nerve in your body is such that I don't even, please don't ask me how I'm doing, for one thing, right? It's just too much. So that is probably that probably just describes it. And then, and as I say, I look for professional help, but I also looked for, my own sort of self-medication, because it did offer some, at least temporary respite and escape, but also meant more secret life too, because then people might question my behavior. And we can't have that.
There's a saying, everybody has a page in the DSM. and
right.
for listeners, the DSM is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual that we use to diagnose people. And we all have a page in the DSM. As we were preparing for this interview, I asked you, what does recovery mean to you? And you had shared kind of multiple definitions of recovery. Can you talk a little bit about that now?
First of all, I think I fussed about the word recovery, because being 72 years old and being in a recovery process for, not always successfully, I might add, but in a recovery process for a very long time. Back in the day, recovery meant, just one thing. If you said you were a person in recovery, it meant it was drugs and alcohol, right? And that was the sort of the euphemism for it. And again, like what we just shared about depression, is recovery is describing what? Recovering what? Because some folks would say, listen, I never had it to begin with, so I don't know what you think I'm recovering. And also, and I explained to you, I had a heart attack, right? So we're recovering. I just believe that if the word has any value, it does in the broadest sense of the meaning, that we're all recovering from a loss, from a head cold, from COVID, from substance use, the loss of a friend or relative, a loved one. In that sense, we're all recovering. And I think I said to you also that, and I know we're going to talk about WRAP, the Wellness Recovery Action Plan, is that I kind of embraced that, because that was about, well, it is wellness recovery, but I latched onto that first word. So rather than describing myself, I'm a person in recovery. And then, you got to go down that rabbit hole. What does that mean? Right. But I'm a person in wellness. That's what I want in my life. That's what I aspire to. And that's what I try to practice, is being a person in wellness.
I so appreciate your critical thinking about that term to help us all think about it more deeply. People with dementia cannot reclaim neurocognitive functioning.
Right.
Generally, it's a degenerative condition, but you can have wellness living with
that's right
a degenerative condition.
No, absolutely. You can still have what we really, really need, which is connection.
Yeah.
Just on addiction, and then we can go to Alzheimer's. Dr. Gabor Mate. Do you know Gabor Mate? He's my guy. Saw him in person, just blew me away. So it's just, and it's hanging up here over my desk. Addiction, the opposite of connection. And that, I think, and I don't know, maybe it's probably not for everybody, but that's what it was for me. It was the abject loneliness, that disconnection with other people, a lack of a genuine connection with other people. And in terms of recovery or wellness or getting better, it was through connections.
Well, tell us about that. Tell us about, you had, it sounds like since high school, maybe experienced depression, then following that, found a way to self-medicate through substances that added more chaos and harm and multiple lives. And then there was a 13-year process of working toward wellness. Shall we just say wellness in lieu of recovery?
Oh, sure.
Working toward optimal health. So what was the inspiration? You're saying it was too painful to lack connection. And what was the inspiration to move toward health and wellness, mental health and wellness?
Well, it does relate to those connections, and it does relate to, there was always, it wasn't like I was clueless, right? Maybe that, like we say, well, he's clueless. And probably people looked at it and said exactly that. But that wasn't true. I knew that there was something else. I knew something was missing, or that something was, I hate to say wrong, but that something, was off, and had, for some reason, had hope, had some sort of underlying seed of hope that had been planted. And I know I talked about the role of my grandparents in my life, and a great aunt and uncle also. So I know we're getting to the older adult thing, right? Which I am now. I'm their age now. I'm older than they were, right? When they were, I thought they were old then. Those connections, there was something there that stayed with me over time, that I knew that existed. So that was part of it. And others is, I talked about, the exhaustion, the evisceration of depression, just the whole thing got to just be too much. And I told you about, we talked about like sort of the secret lives, plural thing, and just the loneliness, the isolation, the fatigue of playing make-believe, of having a work life and then pretending to have a family life that looked good on the surface. All this looked really good. The suffering was on the inside. And who do you share that with that wants to even hear it? Right? So that led me to search, to seek. And I say initially it was professional help. And I do say this in my work now, because we work with both professionals and with peers, people with lived experience. Now, lived experience becomes this other euphemism, right? So in my crew, if you say lived experience, we know what that means, right?
Well, say more about that, because now we're using terms for
aren't
peer
we
support.
all having this is why I just fuss so much at language. Not that I have a better language for it, but it's all it is euphemism, like lived. Aren't we? Hopefully, we're all having a lived experience, right? For a while, anyway, until we don't. So it just becomes this euphemistic way of saying this is someone who's experienced really big feelings, difficult emotions, has had traumatic experiences or losses in their life that affect them in ways that probably dismay them as much as it may be, their family or loved ones. Jim, why do you act this way? Well, because something's going on, I guess, right? So I was always thought that there was something to go after. So thank goodness, for that. And
what do you suppose your grandparents implanted in you or gave you? You attribute them to being part of this healing journey?
Yeah, well, they were a respite from a home situation that was not horrible, but difficult enough that, again, this is my best instincts, right? This isn't my bad coping. This is my good coping, is that I need to go stay with my Nana and Grandpa this weekend. And I love them. I really don't know I wish I knew their backstory. I wish I had questions for them now. First of all, the humor. My grandmother was inappropriately, outrageously would say things that were just funny. And but they were also very accepting and non-judgmental, certainly of kids behavior. I guess they'd raised four of their own, so by the time I came along, it was like, whatever he did. But I shouldn't word it that way. I mean, these were good sort of German background. I mean, it was not strict, but you knew what the boundaries were. But helping my grandfather in his garden, and that's something that I've always still been in love with, and just they weren't effusively or overly emotional loving, but you knew that they were loving, that they loved you, that they had you, that I was perfectly at home there, and I just loved being with them. They were my mother's parents, and we were close. They visited. We probably had dinner at our house. All of those traditions of the 50s. Spaghetti on Thursday night, and then dinner on Sunday, and and they would be there. My great aunt and uncle too. My grandmother's sister. And it sort of held up, I guess, sort of an ideal of what family life could be, that kind of connection. The other thing I did want to say is, in the seeking professional help, so I thought that's what I needed to do. And I did. And I did, even in my 20s, I knew, but I don't think back then they quite knew what was up with me. I don't know. I don't think it was that complicated, but they didn't, or we didn't figure that out together, which I think is the other aspect, right? Trying to find somebody that's going to cure me is probably not going to work, but finding someone to work with, can we talk, can we learn about you, and maybe we can work together towards some solution. So I knew I needed, professional help. That's cool. Got it. And I work with professionals now, right? Even in the peer world, we work with their supervisors that may be clinicians as well as the peers. And so I train supervisors, which I think, this is the most preposterous thing. They're going to look at me as like one of their patients or something, but I'm going to train them about supervising CPSs. So to get over that, what I usually do is thank them. First of all, thank you. Because there were times in my life I needed your help. I needed professional help. It was necessary. It was not sufficient, is the issue. What is sufficient is what we're talking about here, peer support. So what's life after professional health? How, what new relationships, what new connections, or renewed connections, recovered connections, perhaps, with family. And that's me and daughter number 3, very profound experience of disconnection and anger, rightful anger, and reconnection at a depth that's hard to explain, how deep a relationship can be.
Are you willing to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah.
Will you share about what was required to restore and heal the relationship so it could build the trust needed to go deep?
Yeah. So I train CPS as certified peer specialists, right? And we go into a number of things. They're motivational interviewing, open-ended questions, reflective listening, active listening. The fact that what the business that we're in is not curing, not advising, not fixing, but being with, learning together, mutuality. And when I trained this course, we just finished one online as well. And the guy said, "Well, I don't know if I'll ever use this." Listen, I'm going to tell you a secret. I'm not working in a homeless shelter doing crisis outreach. Where this has most affected me is at home. It's in relationships. So with my daughter, the second marriage daughter, she's 31 now. She was a teenager during, some pretty heavy duty nonsense, acting out, drug use, and what that meant in terms of home. being here, not being here, people scared. Is he alive? Is he dead? So she was, of my four daughters, every other one kind of were at an age where they could really get the brunt of this. So she was pretty angry with me, pretty done with me. And I can't use the language on the podcast, but we were, she was this far away from me, and she told me, I know every boom dirty thing that you about. And I was already in this peer support part of process of wellness, and I didn't react. I wasn't reactive. I didn't try to defend. I didn't get angry. I didn't try to explain. Just listen. Just listen. And then time went on. Just, not sure that it was a conversation or a series of conversations either, but just being there for her, right? In ways that you can make all kinds of promises to people, right? But if you're actually, my thing would be, don't make the promise, just do it. Show up, do what you're supposed to do, and see what happens. There's no guarantee. I mean, she could still be right, angry with me, but and I'm close with all four of my daughters now, and it's very, very fortunately. I mean, it does not have to be, but she and I are probably, just because of the timing that it intersected at that kind of time, connection again. Right? Because she was hurt too. It wasn't just that I was hurting or that I was sick. Right? We were both hurting. Mm-hmm. So being able to share that vulnerability, to be able to for her to be honest with me,
and for you to receive it.
That's the space that makes that kind of healing possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. For a lot of my friends, and myself included, have had difficult relationships with our parents. My mom had a severe mental illness when I was growing up, and still she's in a very stable place now, which is wonderful, and living in wellness. And, but part of her mental health journey led to some abandonments in my life and in my brother's lives. And the way that my mom and I were able to repair our relationship is that my mom really took responsibility for hurting us and hurting me. And, I'm sure she's had this conversation I have four brothers, with each of my brothers uniquely, but in conversation with me, she has been so non-defensive about mistakes made in the midst of illness. And that has granted me the opportunity to give her more grace in living she was a single mom of 5 kids. I'm a married mom of 2 kids. And I'm like, that also has extended a lot more compassion from my direction toward my mom. I think life is the ultimate teacher of these, challenges, but maturity on my part, doing my own work in therapy, and my part, it was my part in healing the relationship, kind of seeing my mom as a unique person outside of being, in addition to being my mom, just all of the challenges that she had. But I talk with my friends, and my friends will share, like, I don't have the closeness, right? Like I'm still in a sort of detached place, or a cut off place from my parent. And there's some pain there, and still wounds that haven't healed. And largely, they'll ask me, well, what was it with your mom? Like, how are you and your mom in a relationship when there was so much loss and pain and abandonment and struggle? And I think because my mom could do the work, like my mom apologized, stood and listened, like you were describing, standing and not being defensive and receiving it, and then working and showing up and working toward healing in herself and in the relationship. And I think that's been a great teacher for me I'm not a perfect parent, and when I make mistakes with my kids, how to show up for them and to be vulnerable for them and apologize. I think what you're talking about in healing these relationships that come in the sort of storm of illness, like mental health concerns and substance use concerns are all illnesses, right? And so and some people some people appreciate the term illness, others don't. I'm going to use the term illness because there is a biological, physiological, psychological component.
Sure.
And then I think what you're talking about, Jim, is essential because you're talking about healing relationships and healing relationships, but also healing in the context of relationships. And that I think is essential to growth and connection.
Yeah, I do too. I agree with that. Yeah. This poet, Rilke, I guess, right, has this line of those who are willing to be vulnerable move among mysteries. And I like that. And I want to be vulnerable. Well, I see where that, I mean, that's not an easy place to be. But I do see what, the benefits of it. And I think, you say like, thank you for being, also at 72, it's like, well, what the hell?
What do I have to lose?
I don't have any secrets anymore. But it also relates, I told you, I was tired of them. I think that was part of what was making me exhausted, was making believe of thinking that I have to have these secrets that if people know, they won't love me, or they won't let me work here anymore, or what will they think of me, or what, or whatever. It's just exhausting hanging on to all of that. So it's great to be of an age or of a mentality that says, I'm open, I'm vulnerable. And so the cats that I hang out with, that's sort of what we're about now anyway, right? So
now tell us about your role as a certified peer specialist.
I was working in human services. It actually was a jobs program in Philadelphia, big jobs program in Philadelphia. Oh my God, the stress of that was enough as well. And but I was in therapy. I had a therapist, John Burns, played the guitar like I do. We would end the session with playing a song together. It was great. And one day he pulls these papers out of his desk, these mimeograph Xerox things that you could hardly read. So I just learned about this at Drexel University. It's called WRAP, Wellness Recovery Action Plan. Maybe you want to take a look at it. And I took it home and probably didn't look at it right away, right? But I did open it up and read it. John was a good guy, so if he was recommending something. And here's what happened with this WRAP, with this Wellness Recovery Action Plan. There's a set of questions there. And the first question was, describe yourself when you're well. What are you like when you feel well? That it was not a question anyone was asking me. They wanted to know what the hell was wrong with me and why I acted the way I did. So for somebody to say, what do you like when you're well? Describe yourself. That was the hook. This was like in the spring. I can't remember what year it was, but and then WRAP, the Wellness Recovery Action Plan, Mary Ellen Copeland, older adult, herself with, there's an interview right there for you. They have their first WRAP Around the World conference in Philadelphia. So I go to this. I said, well, I'm going to go to that conference. I like this WRAP. I've got a WRAP, but I'd never taken a course or was it part of a WRAP group or anything. I didn't know how. It was just an individual thing, right? And WRAP is it's just a way of organizing people's wellness. There's nothing sort of very complicated about it. It's like, what do you like when you're well? What do you like when you're not well? What are your triggers or stressors? And let's do an action plan. right? Let's be proactive about this. So rather than wait until all hell is breaking loose, why not have a plan in your back pocket? Well, here's who I'm going to call. Here's where I'm going to go. All of that kind of stuff. So I go to this conference and I have lunch with a couple of people, Yvette and Deborah, and they work for a place called Mental Health Association of Southeastern Pennsylvania, since rebranded as Mental Health Partnerships, right? So they get a little bit of we're having lunch and we're talking rap, and they hear my history and that I've done some facilitation, and they were trainers for the certified peer specialist. I never heard of what's a certified peer specialist? Well, you should take our training. So I did. I took their training. I was already a rap person. That's something they train in too. So I went and took the certified peer specialist training from them, not knowing whether I was working already, whether I was going to get a job doing that or not. But within a matter of months, I was actually working with them, and this goes back 9.5 years ago now. Training certified peer specialists, which are folks with the lived experience of mental health, behavioral health challenges. And it offers sort of, in part, a career path, right? These are jobs in Pennsylvania. So folks who want to help, want to give back, want to believe that they can use their lived experience, that their story may be the strongest tool in their toolbox of helping another individual who doesn't know what's going on with them and would like some help that can relate. So I've probably, I don't know how many, probably close to 1,000 people now have been in classes, and that's a place to be, in a class with other folks, and they start to tell their stories, and you have a story of your own, but you look at them and say, how are you even standing? What in blazes makes you think that you want to help somebody else? Right? What are you talking about after all that you've been, right? No, because they get it.
Yeah.
They get it, that this is, I can, because
and the
I've
resilience.
Yeah. So it's great. That's how I got from rap to peer to peer support, all by happy accident.
Oh, well, I'm so glad you're in this role. And that started in your early 60s.
Well, I was then. Yeah, I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know what was next, or whether I wanted to retire. And I think I may have emailed you this too. I have a friend that I had worked with years ago, Mark Friedman, runs an organization, I guess they're out in San Francisco now, encore.org, which really is about the antidote to our society's sort of like old people, just put them out on the curb, or, we're done. We have nothing to offer anymore, and saying, no, we have this national treasure here of old folks, of experience, of love, grandparents, of all of that we really should be tapping into. So that was kind of in my mind too.
Well, now, since you became a certified peer specialist, you now are a certified peer specialist for older adults.
So, University of Pennsylvania, Dr. Cynthia Zabritsky has a certified older adult peer support program, COAPS, COA, whatever, PS, COAPS, certified older adult peer specialists. And yes, I'm one of their trainers. So we do it so if you became a CPS in Pennsylvania, for example, and other states have certified, not all states, but a lot of states do have certified peer specialists. Becoming a certified older adult peer support would just give you a little bit of a edge on a specialty, or might correspond to an interest that you're interested in working with older adults. We also have youth and young adult and LGBTQ plus, and so there's all kinds of ways that peer specialists can find their niche and dig in. But I have, as an older adult myself, I've really enjoyed that affiliation with them and training that course as well.
Wonderful. So what recommendations do you have for older adults who might be struggling with their own mental health concerns?
Yeah, I think for a lot of us that I was just in a focus group too with other older adults as a follow up to that online conference that you and I were at or attended online. So I still see it, stigma, the taboo, especially in African American communities, maybe other minority communities as well, where it's just not, there's enough going on without having that or whatever the taboo or stigma is about it. So I think that's one of the barriers right there, is for people to be able to be honest with themselves that I don't have to feel this way. I'm lonely. I'm disconnected. I'm, whatever it is that's going on. I mean, I don't think there's any easy suggestions. As someone that was depressed, I know how hard it is to, you do have to get up off your rear and go find somebody or someplace to help. And that takes energy to do that. Now I live in a city. I live in Philadelphia. So there's a lot of problems here, incidentally. If anybody reads the news, our big cities, especially with young people and gun violence, it's horrible. But there are services and there are places and there's, community centers and activities and peer support and people that that are reaching out. But you have to reach back. I know I took care of my great aunt, right? My grandparents did pass away. They were probably in their 60s when they did, but my Nana's sister, my Aunt Doris, lived to be 99. So I inherited her. I inherited her from my mother, who passed away when she was 67. Wow. And she had depression. I remember when we were young, her mother-in-law died, and she had an awful bout with depression. But she stayed connected, right? She's always part of like these community, I don't even remember what they were, but community groups, went on trips, would not abandon her car. She was banging into things. It was awful. I mean, it would not leave her house, or, she lived there alone for 25 years after. But she had something that pushed her. She had good friends. And I think that's the one thing. Now, the dilemma is that we lose our friends when we're older. You never know what the next phone call, or that phone call at 2:30 is. Oh my God, who died now, right? That kind of thing. So, but maintaining those friendships, making new friendships, peer support, music. See, that's my thing now is music. So my thing is, I want to play for older adults. See, I always thought like, well, they won't want to hear my music because they want to hear old people's music. Well, Jim, you are an old they grew up listening to the same music you did. So they will not be offended if you start playing a few Bob Dylan tunes.
Please play a few Bob Dylan tunes.
Yeah, so part of it is on the older adults, right? You have to reach out and want that, and it's hard to look at. But I think part of the responsibility is for family members and society or groups that endeavor to do this. Then you have to reach out. You have to say, the John Prine song, "Hello in There." You have to say hello in there. And keep doing it. I think sometimes in our world of help, it's like, well, I offered my help and they didn't want it. No, you're like a beacon. You're like a lighthouse. That message has to keep going out periodically when the light comes around and it beams. And that's what was the recovery process for me. It wasn't that there was finally, I don't know, somebody must have said something. I know what it was that got to me. Partly what I'm saying is that we, and this is a wrap thing. This is a wellness recovery action plan principle, actually, is hope, right? But it's also personal responsibility. So if I thought, and that was a big one for me in rap, if I thought, that you were going to make me better, or the doctor over, or my wife, or, my daughter was going, that wasn't going to happen until I, took the reins and said, no, I want to be well. So there is a personal responsibility thing that, people either do or they don't. But I'm saying on the other side, family members and society or the community, whatever that is, has a responsibility, has a personal responsibility as well to continue to reach out. Even if the person is reluctant, you show up. You show up. Pat Deegan, who's one of our heroes in the peer world, was very ill, schizophrenia, I guess, when she was 17 and was at home. Doctors, of course, said, you're never going to get better. And her grandmother, see, these wise grandmothers, see, this is the older adult connection. The older grandmother lived with a family, and she would come down and say, Pat, I'm going shopping. Do you want to go with me? No, she didn't want to go. She was sitting on the couch smoking cigarettes and drinking Coca-Cola. That's, yeah. Next day, going to the market. You want to go with me? No. This goes on for a while. Finally, one day, but she's persisted. In a matter-of-fact way, not a forceful or judgmental. You want to go to the market. Finally, one day she says yes, but I won't push the cart. Right? Eventually, she's like doing the shopping with her grandmother. So I don't know, a silly story, but I think it's that keep showing up, even if my older friend is crabby, grouchy, doesn't go away, all right, just want to see if you're all right. I'll be back next week, right? So you stop back, and who knows? Some days like, yeah, sit down, tell me your story, tell me what was it like growing up, and that's the thing that we kind of started on. What's the shortest distance between two people? Their story.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing your story with us and all of your wisdom. Jim, do you have a guitar with you?
God knows if it's tuned. I'm here in my basement office, right?
You want to sing us a song? Yeah. Do you want to sing us that John Prine song?
I'm trying that. Had an apartment in the city. Me and Loretta like living there. Well, it's been years since the kids have grown, a life of their own, left us alone. John and Linda live in Omaha. Joey's somewhere on the road. We lost Davy in the Korean War. Still don't know what for. Don't matter anymore. Old trees just grow stronger. Old rivers grow wilder every day. Old people just grow lonesome, waiting for someone to say hello in there, hello. Me and Loretta, we don't talk much more. She sits and stares through the back door screen, and all the news just repeats itself like some forgotten dream that we both had seen. Someday I'll go and call up Rudy. We work together at the factory. What could I say if he asked what's new? Nothing, what's with you? So if you're walking down the streets in time, spot some hollow ancient eyes, please don't just pass them by and stare as if you didn't care. Say hello in there. Hello.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful. I cannot thank Jim enough for taking the time to be on the podcast today and sharing his story. The more we share our experiences of mental health and talk about our own lived experiences, the more I believe we dismantle the stigma and the shame. I also think it's incredibly important in terms of barriers for older adults receiving mental health care. Stigma is one of the primary barriers to older adults engaging in care. And the more older adults are willing to share their own experiences and their own stories, the less stigma there will be, and the more likely older adults will be to access mental health care. So thank you, Jim. Thanks for sharing your story and your music with us. Now, are you a mental health or senior care provider? I have a free guide just for you called the Mental Health Professional's Guide to Working with Older Adults. In it, you'll learn the 5 facts that every professional working with older adults must know. To download this free guide, which is filled with lots of helpful resources, go to mentalhealthandaging.com/pro guide. All one word, all lowercase. mentalhealthandaging.com/pro guide. All right, that's all for today. If you like this episode, please subscribe and leave a review, because subscriptions and reviews help other people to find this show. And the more people listen and the more people hear the lived experiences of older adults and hear from experts working with older adults in the mental health field, the less stigma there will be and the more resources there will be in this world. All right, that's all for today. I'll see you next week, same time, same place. Bye for now.